So we're up to Chapter 4 on customer service. Customer service, according to Gorman and Sulentrop, it's all about perception. It doesn't matter if that perception is factual or not, and if you think about working with young adults, sometimes their perception is different than what an adult's perception is. So we're going to talk today, I'm going to focus on, there was a focus group in California about teen attitudes and the perception of libraries. And for the most part, these were public libraries. Teens don't see either the value or convenience of using a public library. And if you think about it, most people think because you can Google everything now that you don't actually need a library. And I don't know how many times I have to hear from colleagues in the business already of being a school librarian, or even from the outside, oh, do we even still need the school library or even public libraries? And the answer is yes. Yes, we do. So we need to make the teens see the value, and others, and the convenience of using the public library. Libraries make teens feel uncomfortable, unlike a bookstore. Libraries need to be more physically attractive and relaxed. Remember, this is according to teens. Teens believe that the library staff view them with suspicion. Teens use libraries mainly for homework, and libraries need to be more user-friendly. Those were perceptions that came up through this focus group. Library staff need to become more user-friendly. Rather than sitting behind that desk with those pursed lips, they need to come out and assist teens. Are we getting anything right? Are libraries getting anything right in teens' eyes? Well, one answer, yes. There are several things. Displays. Teens notice them. They want them to be attractive and eye-catching. And that was something that I struggled with in my school library. I'm a terrible bulletin board creator. When I was down in my old library at Greenbrier Middle School, I had 2 giant bulletin boards, but I had an assistant. She did a great job with coming up with really cool book related bulletin boards, and I thought that was fantastic. That was just something, being a secondary person, I'm just a terrible bulletin board person. When we moved into my new library, I didn't have a bulletin board, thank goodness, but I did have this row of windows that look out to the regular hallway that students had to walk by if they ever went to the bathroom, on the way to the 6th grade hall, on the way to the cafeteria. So they were heading down that hallway all the time. And for years, a couple of years, I didn't access those or use those windows for anything at all, other than just as a view to the hallway. Well, a few years ago, I had some 7th grade library workers, and they wanted to create an entire display where they covered the doors and they used that entire wall of windows to display this whole underwater theme. And when they came up with the idea, I said, absolutely, go ahead, knock yourselves out. They did the most amazing job of incorporating books and other resources that we had in our library facing to that outside hallway. They made a whole underwater scene, but they used the resources. They had these some great artwork that they had taken from, they borrowed it from the 7th grade art teacher. It was a project they had just finished in their 7th grade art classes. They were these little jellyfish things, and they really looked fantastic displayed in those windows. Then they covered the doors, the 2 glass doors leading into the library, and they made a little submarine on one side, and I can't remember what all was on the other side, but they realized pretty early on, when one person would try to go out of the doors, if someone was standing on the other side of those glass doors, they couldn't see, and they might hit the person. So the girls said, oh, what if we cut out the window? Like a portal in the submarine. And it was really great, because if you looked from the outside in, if anyone was sitting at the circulation desk, it looked like they were sitting in this submarine. So it was just fantastic, and kids really did notice it. A few years ago, I had some practicum students from UCA doing their practicum in my library at the middle school, and that was something they asked. They did theirs in the summer, and they said, is there something that you really need? And I said, yes, because by then my principal had decided we needed a bulletin board outside the library, and I shared it with the keyboarding teacher, and she actually loved to do bulletin boards, but every once in a while she would say, okay, Erin, it's your turn, and so I would have to come up with something. So I told the ladies that were working on their practicum, I said I'd love just a great bulletin board idea for, the beginning of school next year. And so they had, looked on Pinterest and stuff, and they found the Red Box or Read Box. And so they did one, and it was amazing. And these kids would come in those first few days as they were even, setting up lockers and things. When they came through for orientation, they would see different book jackets in that Read Box or Red Box, and they would come in asking about those books. So teens do definitely notice displays. Computers and internet access, that's the greatest thing, is that they have internet access and access to print, because that's something a lot of times, if you've noticed, students, if they have to turn in a paper and they had to do something at home, it's always my printer's out of ink. And that was something that my school library, we started homework club in the morning, and I was always open before school anyway. They could come in and check books in and out and use the computers, but when they started homework club in there, it was a great spot. They either had an English or a math teacher in there with me in the mornings, and that way if they had math or literacy homework, they could always ask, but they could do all of their other library business, and they could print and do other things that they needed to do. If they needed to finish up a project or use the internet, if they had like a internet-based game, they had maybe a test that day, so we had that open. Homework, that is definitely a place where teens go to use the library. They recognize that it is a great place to do homework, and they want homework centers for help or online support. So that was where our homework club really helped out. And since I was going to be open anyway, it just made sense. They love that it's free. They love that they can check out or rent books and DVDs and CDs and access the internet for free. But a lot of times students don't think about getting an actual library card so they can take the stuff with them. Which I find kind of odd. So we've done partnerships with the Faulkner County Library, where the librarian, one of the librarians, would come into my school, or sometimes if we couldn't connect and get that done, they would send the forms so that the students could fill out and register for a library card. I do know that one of the Conway middle schools, I believe wherever Sloan Powell is, they do an interlibrary loan with the Faulkner County Library. She physically, and I don't know how it still works now, but she would take, the students could look online for the Faulkner County Library resources and find things that they wanted to check out, and Sloan would go, or they had a delivery thing, I think, set up, and those books would arrive, and she would hand those out to the students, and then when they finished, they could turn them back into her library. So it was much more conducive to being, because middle school students, they can't drive themselves, so it just made it more accessible for them. Quiet. A lot of kids are looking for a quiet place to work. And that was something that with our homework club, a lot of my students, they would just come in and they just want to sit quietly and read. And that was fine. They do say if there is helpful staff, one positive experience spreads the word of mouth, as well as one bad experience. And I think about our own UCA library. Several years ago, my niece had come here for her undergraduate degree. She was working on a teaching degree and playing soccer for UCA. She came up from Texas, which I thought was pretty cool that she wanted to come where Aunt Erin was. But she went into Torreson one day, and I don't know if the person was having a bad day, but she said it was the most horrific experience in a library she had ever had. They were just not helpful at all at the reference desk. So it took her probably a year before she would ever go back. And after that, it did get much better. But I don't know if it was a student worker. She really didn't. She said it was just so terrible she didn't even want to think about it. So we definitely need to be helpful. Okay, so the ideal customer-focused library service for teens. They want self-checkout. I don't know that that's always feasible in middle school, junior high, and high school. And I don't want to stereotype, but it seems like as students age, they maybe try to get away with more stuff, especially in those middle and junior high levels. So it seems like I had more problems in middle school with students trying to take books without checking them out than I did at a high school. You just need to know what's going to work at your level. I do know that at the Greenbrier elementary levels, K-5, the librarians are the prep period for the teachers, so they have gone to the self-checkout and they love it, and it really works very well. Just because it frees up the librarian, they can go and help others with books and stuff. At the middle school, junior high, and high school, when a class came to the library, the teacher was with them. It was a co-teaching experience. Plus, at middle school, junior high, and high school, we had student library workers, student helpers every period, so I didn't have to sit behind the circulation desk. They do want space to hang out that's comfortable. So, if you can offer those couches and other places. I know that the Faulkner County Library in Conway did a remodel a few years ago and added just some really comfortable chairs and stuff in their teen space. Piped music, you could think about rotating genres throughout the week. If you use Pandora or some satellite service, you just need to check into it because of the public nature in a public library. I don't know if that would be a copyright infringement. With the library, sometimes that comes into play, thinking about whether or not you can do it there. So just be very careful. They want up-to-date collections. That would definitely help boost the customer focus. They do want food and beverage services, and a lot of high schools and some of the other places, they've started like coffee house atmosphere, or they offer like hot chocolate and stuff, and I know that it works in some places. Some, though, with the carpeting and all of the other issues, the custodial need that might have to come and clean up, that's not always reasonable to expect within a school library. When I did book clubs, I did allow my kids to bring their lunch. A lot of times, if we could do our book club outside, we had some picnic tables right outside of the library. We would do it there, and that way we just carried out a trash can and stuff. They do want helpful, friendly staff. They would prefer if they had some type of handheld device that would help locate items on the shelf. The OPAC does have, or my OPAC had an app that you could download onto an iPad or a phone. Same thing like with when we did the book fair the last time with Scholastic. The last several times, our students a couple of years ago got to bring cell phones when they came to preview, and there was a Scholastic app, and they could watch different book trailers and stuff, and that was really, the kids thought that was really cool. They do want a supply area with pens, pencils, glue sticks, things that they might need if they're working on a project, and that was something that our homework club offered. We had a box of supplies that we just kept in there. That kept the kids from having to go back to their locker and do things. They do want a group or study area, and we had the big tables, so if a group needed the big tables to work on a project, maybe a big poster or something, that was an option for them. If you have laptop checkouts or Chromebook checkouts, that's huge. Our high school has started offering some Wi-Fi hotspots that students can check out, and that really helps those kids that are either traveling, maybe with an FFA field trip or something else. They're going to be gone overnight, at that high school level, or it also helps those kids who don't have internet at home or their internet is so spotty. We live out in the middle of nowhere, and that's something that my own kids struggle with. Sometimes they'll turn on the hotspot on their phone to power, the laptop or whatever that they're trying to work on. They do want free days with to return overdues with no fee charges, especially at the teen level. Typically, you have fines for days that materials are late. So if you can be creative and let them coincide maybe with National Library Week in April, that was always a really helpful time to get back a lot of the books before the end of the year. I always offered that during Teen Read Week in October. They brought their books back. I either did half price find days one time, I do a free find day. Even during Thanksgiving and Christmas, if we were doing a food drive, sometimes you could accept food instead of collecting a fine. And a lot of times I had much more success. At the end of the school year, my middle schoolers, if I walked out onto the playground, that years ago they used to have an extra recess sometime in the middle, or if it was right at the end of the school year, different teachers would take their kids outside. If I walked out with, those super cheap popsicles and gave those out to anybody who didn't have a fine or an overdue, I don't know how many kids would pull a dime out of their pocket. They had owed that 10 cents for 3 months, but when you offered them a popsicle, they found the money really fast. So it always kind of tickled me when things like that would happen. Some characteristics of someone who would be an ideal staff member or person to work with teens. They want someone who is friendly and knowledgeable, someone who has some humor, but they really don't want someone who tries to be too funny. They do want someone that respects the team and what their needs are. They want someone who knows what's going on. They want someone younger but old enough, and this one, in the text kind of made me think about, we really can't choose how old we are, so we I guess need to stay in the loop. They want someone who can use technology proficiently, especially if the teen has questions. They want someone with good customer service skills. They want someone who displays honesty. And they want someone who doesn't try to be too cool. Okay, and some of the necessary skills, they want someone someone who works with teens needs to have initiative. You can't just sit back. If you're working with young adults, you can't be immobile, intrusive, jargon-filled, judgmental, preachy, rude, unapproachable, uninformed, or uninterested. You can't just sit back. You need to take the initiative because a lot of times they won't come and ask you. You need someone who can maintain relationships, who is enthusiastic and passionate about helping young adults, reading, maybe encouraging them to do better. You need someone who is organized, someone who's creative. And I will say about me, I am not creative, or I don't think I am, but I do find that I come up with some really good ideas, but I don't want to be the one that plans it out. So a lot of times I would turn it over. And I found those 7th graders that, I started at a high school level. And so I had seniors, juniors and seniors who worked for me, and they could do anything that I needed them to. So I didn't have an assistant. Then I went to Bob Court Wages for a little bit, and I had an assistant there 3 days a week. So, and we had some student workers, and that was 8th graders. And they really could do things. When I got to middle school, I had 5th, 6th, and 7th grade in Greenbrier. And so I had 7th grade library workers, and I had an assistant the first few years. So Miss Ingram, she was the one who did all of the ideas, the bulletin boards, things like that, and had the students help her. But later, once I lost her and I only had my student workers, I really found that for me to be able to teach and be up in front of the classes, I needed to rely on them, and I needed to turn things over to them. So you do have to have some flexibility in working with young adults. They don't always behave exactly the way you think they will, and you need to have a sense of humor, because if you don't laugh, they'll drive you crazy. You do need to be open-minded. You can't, be real judgmental if they ask you a question about homelessness or drugs or any of those kinds of things. You need to help them find the materials that they need. And you do need to be unflappable, because every once in a while something will just kind of blindside you, and you can't let on that it really affected you. And that one brings to mind just a couple of different stories. When I was at Morrilton High School, I had a really small fiction collection. I was there three and a half years, maybe 3 years and a few months. So that first year was really just a learning experience. What did I have in my collection? What did I need in my collection? Who was going to be using the library? So starting that second year, I saw only the same kids, the kids that already liked to read. They would come in and look at the fiction section. And there was one young lady, she was a voracious reader, and so she pretty much read everything all the way through there, but she was a big fantasy fiction reader. So she gave me some suggestions, so I went ahead and started to build up the collection. Well, some of the books I put on the shelf were things that I had read when I was in high school. That was, I really didn't know other than what this young lady was asking for, because nobody else was really asking. I used, a lot of the selection tools. I looked at book lists to see what was hot. But I went back to things that I had read when I was young, and one of the things that I had read was Forever by Judy Blume. Now, if any of you guys are familiar with that book, you know that it is one of those books that has been frequently challenged, but it does have sex in it, and that's I think the big problem with what most people found offensive. But I will say, as a young adult in high school, it was a place that I learned some things that that I hadn't necessarily experienced, but it gave me a safe place to do that. So one day I was shelving books, and one of my library workers, her name was Jamie, she had red hair, I still picture her, I can't remember her last name, but she was shelving next to me, and she said, "Miss Shaw, have you read the book Forever?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "I took that one home." And I said, "Okay." I was trying not to look at her, she's not looking at me, we were just doing our work, and she said, "I found it very interesting." She said, it told me some things, or I learned some things that that I didn't have to go out and do to experience. She said, "So I'm glad that book is on our shelf." And I thought, that right there, told me that, yes, I had made the right decision, because trust me, I didn't, tell anybody I was putting that book on my shelf or some of the others. But to me, if I connected with one student, because I knew they were having relationships in the town of Morrilton, because a lot of my students, I had an 8th grader pregnant when I was teaching 8th grade earth science, and throughout our school, that was something that was pretty prevalent. So you have to be unflappable, though. So when a student starts talking, you can't just shut them down immediately. And another necessary skill when working with young adults, you have to be a problem solver, because problems will arise, but that's any nature of any library that you're going to be a part of. You do need knowledge of adolescent development, so you need to know what age level you're working with and what their maturity levels, their social development. When I got to Greenbrier, somebody had donated a whole pile of books to my middle school library. It actually was another teacher. Her daughter had cleaned out her bookshelf, and in that pile was this book called Forever by Judy Blume. And I knew immediately that that was not going to work on the shelf in the library that I had moved into. The majority of the students, the patrons at that level, they just would not have been mature enough to handle that. You need knowledge of young adult literature, so you do need to know what books you have on your shelves and what to recommend at what different levels. And you need good communication skills. You need library experience. Definitely helps if you are going to go work, or somebody's going to try to work in a library with young adults. You need competence in emerging technologies. We're supposed to be, I think, on the bleeding edge of technology for the most part. It seemed like anytime anything new came out, that was what my principal expected me to do, was do some type of professional development where I taught the teachers how to use it, or, if it was some new Web 2.0 tool that I could use for something with the students, they expected me to be the one in there leading the charge. And that was something that I wasn't always comfortable with, but, if my principal came in and said, "Hey, I need you next week to do a quick presentation on Edmodo." I had never even heard of Edmodo when she asked me about that. I said, "Absolutely, I can do that." Well, I had to go back and figure out how to use it and then teach it to the teachers. You do need to have good planning skills, and you need to know how to book talk, and that's going to be the next chapter that we work in. You need good public speaking skills, and you need to know the big picture. If you are working with teens in a school library, your library should be the hub of the school, whether actually that could be elementary as well. You typically will see all of the different aspects going on within a school, all the different, how the 6th grade teachers interact with their students. You're going to see the 9th grade teachers, how they plan and develop. But those are some necessary skills, especially when working with young adults in a library. So the final piece will be the Chapter 7 8 and then 10 through 13, I think, but we'll start with book talking in part 3.